Hello and welcome, one and all. My name is Brandon Martin, and I will be presenting to you today a short but concise declaration of liberation and abolition by free and sovereign beings. We gather here today not as subjects of any system, not as vassals of any throne, but as free and sovereign individuals bound only by the immutable laws of nature and the sacred principles of liberty. This is no mere meeting of minds, but a convocation of awakened, those who would not kneel, who would not yield, and those who will never barter their birthrights for the empty promises of tyrants. For too long, the chains of coercion have bound the hearts of men. For too long, corrupt systems, political, financial, and ideological, have sought to enslave the human spirit under the weight of deception and domination. But today we proclaim what has always been true, what no government, no despot, no self-proclaimed authority can erase. We stand upon the foundation of natural law, upon the eternal self-evident truth that no man has rightful dominion over another, that no institution, no empire, no apparatus of power may trespass upon the sovereignty of the individual. And so let it be declared here and now, this declaration of liberation and abolition. When in the course of human events it becomes evident that any people or person of the universe have fallaciously advocated, condoned, and created systems of governance which are by their very nature reliant upon coercion and violence, which are inherently unjust, it is the responsibility of free and sovereign individuals to reject such systems and assert their inherent rights under natural law. A decent respect for the immutable truths of existence compels us to declare the principles that guide this rejection of tyranny and the establishment of true liberty under natural law. The sovereign and autonomous individual recognizes only the legitimacy of the inherent rights of individuals, aka moral agents, and the moral law of nature as the foundation of a free and just society. I, as an autonomous and sovereign individual, also known as moral agent, hold these truths to be self-evident, that all human beings are created equal in rights, that they are endowed by the very nature and virtue of their existence with immutable, inherent, and innate rights. Among these, but not exclusive to, are moral life, liberty, rightful property, and the pursuit for moral happiness. These rights are inalienable, thus cannot be granted or taken away by any individual, collective, or institution. Any attempt to deny or infringe upon these rights is a violation of the sovereign's autonomy and natural law principles, and is therefore null and void and can be met with the necessary use of rightful force or self-defense. No individual has the right to rule or be master of another, nor can any institution claim such a right. All authority in proper context of the master-slave relationship, which is rooted in coercion, is a violation of this immutable truth and must be rejected entirely. What is natural law? Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for the understanding of the difference between violence and non-violent behavior. The understanding of natural law is centered upon bringing our conscience into alignment with objective morality. This means definitively knowing which behaviors are rights because they do not initiate violence upon other sentient beings, and which behaviors are wrongs because they do initiate violence upon other sentient beings. When human beings live in the aggregate in harmony with natural law principles, and therefore are moral, they become and remain free. When human beings in the aggregate live in opposition to natural law principles and therefore are immoral, they become and remain enslaved. Let it be known to all those who cherish liberty that the measure of a people's freedom is bound inextricably to their morals. As righteousness flourishes among men, so does their liberty expand, unrestrained by the yoke of tyranny. But when vice and corruption take root in the hearts of the people, the ground beneath them erodes, and the despot's chains are fastened upon their limbs. No nation was ever enslaved by foreign conquerors before it had first decayed from within. It is not by the strength of kings nor the arms of oppressors that the people lose their freedom. It is by their own abandonment of moral principles, by their submission to fear, and by their willingness to exchange duty for indulgence. When the spirit of virtue wanes, the tyrant finds no resistance, for the people, having forsaken their own discipline, soon beg for the lashes of a master to order their affairs. Let this, then, be the unalterable truth upon which all free men must stand. As the morality of the people rise, so too does their liberty. But as it declines, so follows their enslavement. If we seek to be free, let us first be righteous and courageous. If we desire to cast off the chains of oppression, let us first cast out the vices that make us weak. For no man-made law, no constitution, no decree shall ever preserve the freedom of a nation that has abandoned the laws of nature. Would we remain free men? Then let virtue be our shield, courage be our armor, and truth our sword. What is a right? A right is a freedom within the boundaries of natural law to act as one wills it to be without the infringement or violation of another moral agent's rights. Coercion at all time and on all levels is the violation of someone else's rights and therefore cannot be justified as an exercise of a right. There can be no rights that exist beyond objective moral boundaries. No individual, group, or institution has the moral right to initiate wrongful use of force or to violate the rights of another. And no individual has the right to delegate wrongs, which are in fact a power to act in immoral ways. And this does not absolve a person from moral responsibility if they falsely act upon such erroneous delegations. If an action is wrong, the individual who carries it out, regardless of their role or position, is accountable and culpable for the negative consequences of such actions of violence. Since no individual has the right to steal, murder, trespass, assault, coerce, rape, or enslave, they cannot delegate those rights to another individual, collective, government, or institution. A group of people cannot magically gain rights that no individual within the group possesses. The conversion of inherent inalienable rights into privileges contingent upon permission, compliance, or payment is a violation and attempts to make rights unequal. Thus, it is not to be accepted as legitimate by any logical or reasonable sentient being. And in fact, it doesn't matter if you're logical or reasonable or intelligent, because it's still not legitimate, no matter what consciousness level you're at. If you're a moral agent and you're in a coma, those rights do not magically disappear because you happen to be in a coma and you can't use reason or logic. Therefore, all governments, by their very nature, derive their power not from moral consent, but from the belief in the erroneous dogmatic authority and the use of coercion, violence, and the threat thereof. Such institutions, irrespective of their form or justification exists only to coerce individual moral agents into obedience and submission, subverting their authentic consent, sovereignty, and natural rights. Governments, therefore, are inherently illegitimate and objectively immoral. It is the right and duty of all free beings to reject and abolish them, living instead in harmony with objective truth, natural law, and objective morality, which can be the only foundation for a truly free and just society. The history of governments is a history of repeated violations of natural law, systemic and systematic oppression, and the denial of the innate sovereignty of individuals. To prove this, let the essence of the facts be submitted to the candid world. Governments have enslaved individuals using coercion and violence to deny, restrict, and/or restrain our inherent rights. Governments have stolen the fruits of our individual labor through taxation, forced tribute, and other forms of legalized theft. Governments have created a monopoly on violence, disarming individuals, criminalizing self-defense, and reserving for themselves the unchecked power to use force against the people. Governments have restricted free markets, interfering with voluntary exchange through licensings, tariffs, regulations, and corporate favoritism, stifling innovation and prosperity. Governments have conspired with monopolistic entities, creating centralized economic systems that benefit the powerful while oppressing the independent and the free. Governments have imposed arbitrary laws and regulations, compelling obedience under the threat of violence, regardless of whether these edicts align with natural law or morality, which is moral relativism. Governments have waged wars, spilling innocent blood to expand power, control resources, and enforce domination over others, while profiting from the enslavement, death, and destruction that has taken place from their expansion. Governments have manipulated currencies and created systems of fiat debt currencies or fiat debt slavery, debasing the value of honest labor and subjugating individuals to perpetual financial servitude. Governments have restricted freedom of movement, thought, and speech, erecting borders, prisons, and surveillance systems to control and oppress the people. Governments have fostered divisions and dependency, using propaganda, fear, and coercion to maintain control over individuals while undermining voluntary cooperation and mutual aid. Governments have perpetuated a monopoly on justice, denying individuals the ability to seek fair resolution and restitution of disputes outside of the purview of the state-controlled courts, which often serve the interests of the slave masters, those in power, rather than truth and morality. Governments, in collaboration with central banks, have created a monopoly on the medium of exchange, which is fiat currency and money itself, through the manipulation and centralization of currency and the limiting of competition in the markets. They have stolen the power of free individuals to control their own economic destinies. I affirm that all individuals, institutions, and entities that collaborate with governments or any form of authority that is perpetuating coercion, violence, and the subjugation of free beings are morally culpable of the violations committed by those governments. This includes, but is not limited to, politicians, lawmakers, and most importantly, law enforcement officers who create, uphold, and implement unjust laws and regulations. Corporations, banks, and other financial institutions that conspire with governments or the state to manipulate the economy, monopolize resources, and perpetuate systems of debt and financial enslavement. Media organizations that serve as mouthpieces for propaganda, actively distorting truth, lying, and misleading the people to maintain the status quo of government control. Any individual who directly or indirectly participates in the enforcement of unjust laws or actions, whether through compliance, collaboration, or silence. Let me repeat that part. Any individual who directly or indirectly participates in the enforcement of unjust laws or actions, whether through compliance, collaboration, or silence. I do not claim the seat of final judgment upon humankind, for to do so would be to fall into the very despotism I oppose. Yet in the face of tyranny, I assert my innate right to defend myself by whatever means are necessary against those who would trample, usurp, and or erode liberty. The aggressors, whether through willful malice or blind submission to unjust authority, bear responsibility for the role in perpetuating coercion and must be held to account in proportion to their culpability and complicity. But the acknowledgement of our shared fallibility and culpability in such systems that have permeated the whole of the world must be recognized. We all have played our part in creating the conditions that we are experiencing. Thus, I do not presume to be the ultimate judge of humankind, nor can any individual or group in reality claim to be such. Justice, to be true, must never serve as a new engine of oppression. Then so it must be stated that accountability must be correctly guided by the objective principles rooted in natural law, which safeguards us against the corruption into mere retribution and vengeance, lest we replace one master with another. If we seek a world without rulers, let us be ruled by nothing but truth under the properties and faculties of holistic intelligence, reason, and conscience. And let the justice be that of the free, not the decree of new tyrants in the guise of avengers. Mob rule shall not be tolerated as a form of justice, for it falls prey to the very same issues of moral relativism and social Darwinism that are the axioms of slave systems. These collaborators who knowingly and unknowingly or unknowingly participate in systems of justice will be held accountable for their role in perpetuating coercion, violence, and a denial of sovereignty equal to the level of culpability. The culpability will be gauged under correct and non-biased due process to ensure that through these measures we affirm that the process of accountability shall not be wielded as a tool for further oppression, but as a temporary and necessary step in the restoration of freedom towards a free and stateless society based upon objective truth and morals. Let it be known that I, the sovereign and autonomous individual of the universe or reality, invokes under natural law and defined in this Declaration of Liberation and Abolition that no individual will be bound by any act, man-made law, or regulation imposed by those who claim the right to govern the sovereign individual through whatever arbitrary means, if those conditions are not in alignment with natural law. The sovereign and autonomous moral agent or individual renounces any claim to legitimacy made by the individual, collective, organization, institution, authority, and state or government. For we recognize that no social contract can be valid if it is not objectively moral or freely entered into and directly consented upon by the sovereign and autonomous individual. Governments and all such claims have never obtained a legitimate consent to rule and master any individual, thus they have no power to dictate the life and liberty of such individual. The cornerstone of any valid contract is direct, voluntary, informed consent by any and all parties involved. Any and all contracts signed under duress or coercion are invalid in any and all moral or legal frameworks. All social contracts have always been voided. No one explicitly consents to the social contract when they are born into a society. Instead, they are automatically subject to its laws, taxes, and governance without their voluntary agreement. True contracts allow parties to withdraw if they disagree. Under the social contract, individuals cannot meaningfully opt out without severe consequences, such as imprisonment, fines, exile, or up to death. The idea that using public roads, paying taxes, or staying in a country implies consent is absurd. Practical participation in a system for survival does not equal agreement. Thus, a tacit consent fallacy will not apply to such claims, for governments claim the exclusive right to use force to ensure compliance, making the social contract a tool of coercion, not voluntary agreement. If you refuse to comply with this contract or laws, taxation, or regulations, you face fines, imprisonment, or violence up to death from the state. In every instance, those individuals who have resisted these abuses, seeking to live in accordance with truth, natural law, liberty, and voluntary cooperation, have been met with violence and suppression, for governments fear nothing more than an invocation of abolition of their monopolistic control through the apparatus of the state and government. I, the sovereign and autonomous individual, therefore, as a moral agent under natural law, do solemnly declare that I reject all forms of governance other than self-governance as inherently coercive, immoral, and illegitimate. I affirm that true liberty can only exist in the absence of rulers and masters, where individuals voluntarily cooperate and resolve their differences in alignment with natural law. I pledge to live in harmony with natural law, to defend the rights of all individuals, and to reject all systems of domination and control. Let it be stated with unwavering clarity: any and all attempts to undermine, subvert, or destroy this Declaration of Liberation and Abolition shall be regarded as a direct attack on the sanctity of liberty itself. The Declaration itself does not grant any power or rights. It is a document to be invoked for the knowledge and defense to all those who wish to use it. To tolerate the reemergence of such tyranny would be to condone the enslavement of future generations and the violation of natural law. I affirm the inherent right to self-defense which exists in all individuals by virtue of their moral agency. This right is not granted by governments, documents, or decrees. It is innate and inalienable, which is necessary to secure liberty. The right of self-defense and to bear arms shall not be infringed. It is the right to protect oneself, one's community, and the principles of liberty against any aggressor who seeks to impose domination, coercion, or violence. Any tool of self-defense, whether they be firearms, blades, or other instruments or implements, are necessary to effectively exercise the right to resist aggression. To deny any individual the ability of self-defense and to bear arms is to render them defenseless against violence, whether perpetrated by individuals, groups, or the state or government itself. Doesn't matter. Institutions, entities, groups, it doesn't matter what it is. Governments, nobody has the right to take that away from us. Since it is true that a militia of the people, which is a decentralized distributed force of armed individuals comprised of the body of the people who maintain working weaponry and tactics commensurate to a military force, is necessary for and essential to the preservation of a free way of life, the inherent natural rights of people everywhere to own and carry defensive weaponry of any kind shall never be encroached upon so as to limit or undermine those rights. Should any individual, institution, or collective attempt to reestablish any system of control, coercion, or oppression that violate natural rights of the sovereign being, it is both the moral obligation and the right of sovereign individuals to respond with the necessary force to prevent such evil from taking root. Just as we do not tolerate murder, theft, or assault, or rape, or trespassing, or anything like this on an individual level, we will not tolerate the organized and institutionalized violation of liberty by governments or any other entities. Among the natural rights bestowed upon man by reality or God, none is more essential to the preservation of liberty than the right to speak and communicate freely. This right is not a boon conferred by the generosities of rulers, nor a privilege to be dispensed at the whim of tyrants. It is the birthright of every free soul, woven into the very fabric of our existence by the immutable laws of nature and nature's God. Let no man, no magistrate, no body of legislators presume to silence the words written or spoken of the people. For in the free exchange of ideas lies the lifeblood of a just and virtuous society. When speech and communication is stifled, the mind is shackled, and where the mind is shackled, ignorance and servitude soon take root. Despots fear the truth, for it is the harbinger of their downfall. Thus, they seek to smother it under the weight of censorship and coercion. But let them be warned, truth is a fire that tyranny cannot quench, and those who conspire against it will find themselves consumed in its flames and burnt to ash. A people robbed of free speech and word are but vassals, their thoughts dictated by the decrees of their masters. If we are to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, we must jealously guard this sacred right, wielding it as both a sword and a shield against oppression and a beacon of enlightenment. Let every man speak and write boldly without fear, for in doing so, he defends not only his own freedom, but the very spirit of liberty itself. Shall we then bow meekly before those who seek to render us mute? Shall we whisper in hushed tones while the chains of despotism are fastened upon us? No, we shall not. Let our voices rise as a thunder in the storm, unyielding and resolute. For free speech and word is the sentinel of all other liberties. Should it fall, so too shall all that is good and just. Therefore, let us proclaim with the fervor of men who would not be slaves, our right to speak and write shall not be abridged, and any hand that dares to seize it is the hand of a tyrant deserving only defiance unto death. I, therefore, the sovereign individual of the universe, invoke this without the need for congressional approval for the exercise of any inalienable right, such as the abolition of all forms of government, which is slavery, requires no approval, endorsement, or authorization by any authority or by any governing body, including Congress, courts, legislators, or any other artificial construct of coercive authority. As an autonomous and equal individual in rights, appealing to the eternal laws of nature and nature's God for the justice of our cause, do in the name and by the authority of the truth solemnly declare, it is the duty of all free men, animated by the spirit of liberty, to resist every encroachment upon their rights, to cast off the chains of despotism, and to stand firm in defiance of every power that would presume to rule them unjustly, with firm reliance on the eternal principles of truth and with steadfast reliance on the eternal principles of natural law. I do hereby pledge my sacred honor, my resources, and my very life to resist all forms of tyranny, to restore harmony, and to protect and uphold the liberty for and of all posterity and progeny. And may posterity, looking back upon this declaration, say, in this age, as in all ages where tyranny has reared its head, there were men and women who would not submit, who would not yield, but who stood as vigilant guardians of freedom, unwavering in their resolve until liberty was secured and the domination of tyrants cast into oblivion. That is the Declaration of Liberation and Abolition. This declaration will be free and open source for any individual to use. It will be available on my website. I will be adding downloadable links for this, and I hope everybody enjoyed this. Normally, I would put together a very lengthy presentation, but I didn't have time for that this year. I hope that all of those who came here today very much enjoyed and learned from this declaration, and it is nothing but an honor to stand beside all of these amazing speakers at the FUNL conference yet again, who are standing for liberty. This declaration goes out to them. I dedicate this to all beings, all holistic, intelligent beings who have ever stood in the face of tyranny and did not bow down. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the FUNL conference.